Welcome to the 2023-2024 Seahawk season review. And yeah, I'm recording this right after I had just recorded another video of Pete Carroll getting fired as Seahawks head coach. So we'll talk about that in this video a little bit later at the end. But in terms of this season, barring the head coaching vacancy, I'm going to go through what I liked about the season stats, and all that good stuff wrapped up in this video here. So let's get started, shall we? And it's another losing season. We were eliminated from playoff contention in week 18 by the Green Bay Packers because they won their game and all they needed to do was win and they would take the 7th seed in the NFC this season. And of course, they did. So we're now in the offseason as of January 10th. But let's get to the Seahawks 2023-2024 season summary. And let's go through the top performers of this season. And let's start off with the offense. It's the passing game. Geno Smith, 499 for 323. That's a 64.7% completion percentage. He had 3,624 yards, averaged 7.3 yards per pass, had 20 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. He was sacked 31 times and had 15 games played. Honestly, looking at the stats from this season, Geno didn't play as bad as people think he did. Honestly, it was just due to the fact that we weren't seeing much production. He did an okay job. I think it was more of the play calling and scheming by Shane Waldron that really impacted his numbers here, especially in the touchdown department. And, I think it was a bunch of other factors too. I think him getting injured with a groin injury and the offensive line giving up 31 sacks on him this year was a big part of it. But hopefully he can bounce back in 2024-2025. For the running game, it was Kenneth Walker. And before the season started up again, on August 6th, I posted the first ever video to my channel. I was talking about Kenneth Walker having a breakout season, and that really didn't happen, but he still had a pretty darn good season. 219 carries, 905 yards, averaged 4.1 yards per carry, 8 touchdowns, and 15 games played. And when you look at that, honestly, he didn't have a bad season. I think again he would have had another 1,000-yard season if he wasn't having to dance around in the backfield so often. Like this season in particular, I saw him I watched every single Seahawks game and I was praising him for his elusiveness and the way he can cut and reverse field so quickly so that when holes close, he can at least get something out of the yardage in the play. But that's also a big problem is that the offensive line's holes for him to go through were just closing way too quickly. And he has these numbers as a result, but not a bad season from Kenneth Walker at all. We get to the receiving category, and it's DK Metcalf, the top performer. 66 receptions, 1,114 yards. He averaged 16.9 yards per reception, 8 touchdowns, and had 16 games played. Honestly, when you look at DK Metcalf for all the stuff that he did this year in terms of penalties, the unsportsmanlike stuff that he was doing to people, he's still got a 1,000-yard season. He's still a great player. And people were, at least Seahawks fans, were very adamant about, oh, he's not being fed enough. He could have had more big numbers if he wasn't fed enough. Well, he's still got 66 receptions in an offense with Tyler Lockett on it, with a new guy in JSN that was picked 20th overall, the first receiver off the board. He had a pretty good season, all things considered, a three-headed monster, and DK still put up the numbers. So, yes, touchdowns, with 8, not great, but they're trying to find roles for every receiver on this team, and it's really a good problem to have when you have too many good wide receivers. But anyways, not a bad season from DK Metcalf at all. When we get to the defense, we're going to talk about the tackling statistic, and it's Bobby Wagner taking the cake. He had 96 solo tackles, 87 assisted, 19 tackles for loss for a total of 183. He had 3.5 sacks, 0 interceptions, 0 forced fumbles, and 17 games played. This man, Bobby Wagner, the entire time I was watching the entire game recap playlist is full of me just praising Bobby Wagner. And there's a reason why. He has gotten the title of most tackles for 3 years now, I believe. And, he gets most tackles here, and he's had his like 12th straight season with 100 plus tackles to his name. So he's ultimately a run stuffer. He is the definition of a run stuffing linebacker, and he's like 32, I believe, at this point. He might be even older than that. But man, just having Bobby Wagner as a stalwart on this defensive front is really nice, and he put up some pretty good numbers despite the defense as a whole taking a little bit of a step back this year. In the sack category, we got Boy Amafe, and when we were talking about him in training camp, the Seahawks were talking about him, especially Pete Carroll. We're talking about he is the most improved guy coming into year 2, and he was on, I believe, the left side of the line, and he was rushing the passer, and that's why he has the sack leader for this season for this defense. 35 solo tackles, 17 assisted tackles, 3 tackles for loss for a total of 52 tackles. He had 9 sacks, 0 interceptions, 1 forced fumble, and games played, he had 16. And the big thing about Boya Mafe that I really liked is watching that guy work. He's just going to get better and better as his career progresses with the Seahawks, hopefully. Because man, the guy can get after it. When he needs to, he can get after it. And I know when Incheno Nwosu went down with an injury and a season-ending injury, he really cooled off and didn't do much, but he broke a record for, I believe it was 7 consecutive sacks in 7 consecutive games, and he broke a Seahawks record. So he's doing something right. So hopefully he'll do even better in 2024, 2025. For the interception leader, and this one really surprised me, but I'm so happy it was Julian Love, man. This guy, when he was brought in at the beginning of the season, I was so ecstatic because all I had heard about Julian Love was that he was a good player. And I was like, I don't know anything about Julian Love. I barely know anything about Julian Love because I'm not a Giants fan. I have no prior knowledge coming into it, whether he's a good player or a bad player. And now I can see why he was loved by the New York Giants. He had 85 solo tackles, 35 assisted, 12 tackles for loss with a total of 123. He had 0 sacks, 4 interceptions, and 2 forced fumbles. And the thing I really love about Julian Love, and the reason why I was hyping him up in the Seahawks game recap videos and telling him, "Oh, we can take Jamal Adams' spot for safety," is literally he can. I want to see him in the strong safety spot where Jamal Adams used to be. I want to see Jamal Adams if we can't get rid of his contract by cutting him this offseason. I want to see Jamal Adams move to linebacker, and I want to see Julian Love be that coverage safety because that guy puts in the work, he puts in the effort, and he can cover. Unlike Jamal Adams, he can cover. So I want to see the effort and the amount of tenacity that he had this season next season because I think he can really show up you know, those 4 interceptions really saved our bacon. It was the one of the game-sealing interceptions against the Eagles, and, that interception was just brilliant. And the forced fumbles, man, even when he does, get beat, Julian Love, he always finds a way to go, "Oh, even if I get beat for massive yardage, I'm gonna at least try to punch the ball out so that I can make up for it and see if I can make a play," which is something we sorely need, on this defense. We need some more heart next season. Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty of it all. We talked about the top performers. Now, let's talk about the record, shall we? A 9-8 record, another 9-8 record, but it is now third in the NFC West after losing to the Rams twice. That's why we're third in the NFC West. It really, really sucks because this was the same kind of shenanigans we had last year where we had to rely on somebody else. I believe it was the Packers last season, and we had to rely on somebody else to get into a playoff spot. And it's the same kind of deja vu feeling here, except this time we didn't make it to the playoffs. And this is part of why we were the 17th best offense in the NFL. Not great, bottom half of the league. Um, 17th in points for with 364 total yards. We were 21st with 5,490. In conversions, we were 29th. That is abysmal. And let's talk about the downs for a second. Let's talk about third down. 23rd, a huge, huge issue this season. And if you watched any of my season recaps, any of my game recaps from this season, where I watched every single Seahawks game and then did a video on it, you would have heard me even at the beginning of the season and at the end saying, "Oh my God, our third down conversion rate is one of the worst in the league." And it really was. We had 207 out of 75 made, which gave us a third down percentage of 36.2%. That is awful. I'm just gonna say it. And the reason why it is so infuriating to see those numbers in stat form for me is due to the fact that we were putting ourselves in third and long situations. Whenever I watched a game and they brought up a little graphic on the down to go distance for this team, it was always, oh, their third downs are usually third and sevens or third and nines this game. And it's like, I wonder why our conversion rate is so piss poor, because we're putting ourselves in positions where we're not getting to the third and fours. We're not getting to the third and twos to easily convert these third downs, and that causes our offense to be one of the worst in the league. In fourth down, we weren't much better. We had 21st to our name, 16 conversions attempted, 6 completed, gave us 37.5%. Not really surprised. Pete Carroll really didn't go for it much on fourth down unless we really, really needed it. And even then, we were a punting team. There was no doubt about it. Michael Dixon is the greatest punter I have ever seen. He's even better than John Ryan. He's 10 times better than John Ryan, in my opinion. But he's really great at what he does. But we really didn't have a good fourth down conversion percentage because of that. But we get into the passing rankings, and we were 11th in total yards with 3,910. And we were 20th in touchdowns, 23 touchdowns, and 18th in interceptions with 12. And that's the entire team. Gino had 9 interceptions, and a lot of his interception woes were pretty just self-explanatory. He would throw underthrown balls at the beginning of the season where you would get into the red zone and you'd be like, "Oh God, it's Gino throwing the ball," and he would throw it up. One of the biggest one of the biggest things for me in that season, the reason why I was going, "Oh god, it's Geno in the red zone," is the Bengals game will always live in my brain rent free because I believe that was week 6. Correct me if I'm wrong, but man, that Mike Hilton interception, one of the worst throws I think I've ever seen Geno throw in his stint with the Seahawks. It wasn't good, and that was a big issue, and that's why we didn't do great in the interception department, and that's why we lost certain games that we should have won. We should have won against the Bengals. We should have won against the Rams when it was 17-16, and those kind of things. So limiting the turnovers is going to be a big thing, and not trying to play hero ball is going to be another big thing next season. Let's get to the rushing rankings. And we were 31st in attempts with 382. Um, and honestly, with the attempts, that's just not good enough, man. In a Pete Carroll style system of West Coast, we know Pete Carroll loves to run the ball, but this season he just couldn't get it established. They really couldn't. And whether it's Shane Waldron not being able to utilize Kenneth Walker, whether it's us being put in, him putting him in second and long, second and tens, and he's just running it and he has to get like 2 yards, and then we get into third and eights. Like that's the exact same reason our conversion rate on third downs was bad and our rushing attempts was bad because at the end of the day, we had to throw the rock so much to get us out of some pretty bad situations. But yards per attempt, we were 20th in the league with 4.1. That's another thing where we just weren't getting the offensive line help. The offensive line this season was pretty banged up from the start. Like Abraham Lucas, he wasn't in a lot of the games. And even then, I think he was dealing with his knee injury through training camp this season. He was dealing with it during the regular season. He was put on IR for like the 6 games. Like he was in game 1 against the Rams where we got completely and utterly gobsmacked, and then he was out for like six weeks. And then we just had so many different line combinations, like so many different line combinations. Like Charles Cross was out for a bit. Anthony Bradford's a rookie, so he'll get some more reps in and playing as he gets older and more experience in the NFL. But man, just this offensive line wasn't very good this season, and that's why our yards per attempt is so low. Our total yards was 28th with 1,580. And that checks out. If every stat for this rushing offense is going to be bad, your total yards is going to be terrible as well. And we were 21st in rushing TDs with 11. Honestly, Kenneth Walker putting up 8, not too bad. He put up, I believe, 9 last year, if I can remember correctly. So, him being a little bit down from what he was last season isn't too bad. I think he'll bounce back. And Zach Charbonnet did decent this year. I believe he had 2 touchdowns, and I believe Geno had 1 rushing touchdown this season. So, they'll get better as things go on. We just need to build up that offensive line and trust those guys a lot more and be prepared for any unforeseen injuries to the offensive line as well, because that was a big problem this year. Let's talk about the worst part of the team. In my opinion, it didn't really move from last season, and that was a big issue because we were the 25th best defense rather, or the 8th worst defense, second year in a row. That's second year in a row that we've been the 8th worst defense. And in the points against, we were 8th, 402. And for yards allowed, we were 3rd, 6,313. That's a little shocking to me. Considering that our defense had supposedly gotten an infusion of youth that we needed. Like Mike Morris was supposed to be there, Cameron Young was supposed to be decent. Derek Hall was probably supposed to get some playing time in there. We had just gotten Devin Witherspoon for our corner group. We were looking very hyped. We were hyped all season long, all off season long about this defense showing up in pass rush, and doing all these cool things with our corners and things. And then we go out on the actual field and we become the eighth worst defense. So there's still a big problem there. Our conversions against were second in the entire league. Our third down conversions, we were third worst in the entire league for against right now. 231. We stopped 107, giving us a 46.3% on third down. That's very indicative of how this season went. When we were on the field, when the offense couldn't get going, like at all, our defense was on the field a majority of the game, and again, we weren't going to stop these third downs because they were gassed. They were playing games. Like I remember in the Ravens blowout, they were playing games where it was like, I believe the Ravens had at the end of the game, they had 40 minutes of possession time in the entire game. You need your defense to be, rested enough so that they can stop getting mauled. But it's just a thing where we couldn't get out and off the field on third downs, and that was a big problem for us. On fourth down, we were 18th. We had 26 attempts run on us. We stopped 13 of them with a 50% on fourth downs. Let's talk about the pass coverage. Yards allowed, we were 12th, 3,961. In touchdowns allowed, we were 18th with 21. And in interceptions, we were 20th with 11. All in all, not great from our pass coverage, but man, looking at some of the corners we had, like we had Reek Woolen, who took a step back this year after his amazing season last year. And then we had Devin Witherspoon, who was the best corner on that entire team, and he should be voted for Defensive Rookie of the Year, in my opinion. And I might be a little biased because I'm a Seahawks fan, but that man can show up. That man played his heart out. That man had so many good plays in him where again, the effort was just there. And you don't see that from a lot of corners where they're willing to just go down at you and punch you in the face, metaphorically with their tackling and dig you into the dirt. So yeah, that's why I think Devin Witherspoon should be Defensive Rookie of the Year. Here's where the chips fall, and here's why the defense was so bad, and it's the run defense. We were the fourth most run against team in the NFL. That's mental. And yards allowed, we were second in the NFL for most yards allowed. 2,352. Considering that we were the fourth most run against team for defense, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised that our number is that high. We couldn't stop anything. Our pass rush was non-existent after Ncheno and Wosu went down. Like we had no pass rush, and that's why we went out this offseason and got Leonard Williams at the trade deadline, because we needed some semblance of a pulse on pass rush, and especially when we needed pass rush, we couldn't get it, and when we needed run stops, we couldn't get it. We were just getting completely demolished. In yards per attempt, we were fifth, 4.6. We were third in TDs allowed, rushing TDs allowed. That was 24. For a team that was supposed to be better on run defense this year, we really showed up, and it seemed like we had gotten worse, and it just wasn't good. I wanted to talk about the 2024 cap situation. So 2024 cap space, 1.25 million as of January 9th. That's how much we have in cap space going in to the offseason right now. We have 23 players on expiring contracts. Some of the big names include Bobby Wagner, Jordan Brooks, Leonard Williams, Devin Bush, Noah Fant, Damian Lewis, and Evan Brown. The Seahawks will need to make some big cuts in order to sign some of these free agents. And I went through some of the names that I think need to be cut this offseason, to allow us to sign, a guy like Jordan Brooks or a guy like Devin Bush. So let's get into it. DT Brian Moe, $5.9 million in savings. Reason for cutting this player. His last game played was on December 20th of 2022 in week 15. With the additions of Cameron Young and Mike Morris drafted last year, I think that Brendan's time with the Seahawks is over. Yes, he did have an ACL tear last season, so it's not really fair to say, oh, he didn't do anything this year because he was still out with an ACL tear. But with releasing him, we would get 5.9 million. And with the draft, with what we did in the draft, we can easily take his contract at him being 28, and we could go and find someone as a cheaper third DT because we already have Jaron Reed, and now we have Cameron Young at DT, and we could even probably move Mike Morris. Even though he's a D end, I think he could probably play DT because I think he's big enough. I think he's like 300 and something pounds. So I think he's big enough to play DT. But if you don't want to do that, go out and get a cheaper third DT for that spot. Another player I would consider cutting is Jamal Adams. We would save $16.5 million against the cap in 2024. Ever since Jamal stepped into a Seahawks uniform, he has had some pretty bad injury concerns, only playing 32 games in his last 4 seasons. At this point, when he was on the field this season, I was really mad at him because he's making money as a safety and he can't cover. He doesn't have the coverage skills to be a safety anymore. And that's got to probably deal with something like his injuries, that he's had. Because he tore his ACL. He missed all of last season. So him being in coverage is not good. He's also been very much known for playing as a box safety. If you're going to play him as a box safety, move him to linebacker. And considering that he loves rushing the passer, he's very good at that. So use him. Use him as a rusher. Don't use him as a safety. Don't use him in coverage, because one of the big plays and one of the big concerns I had with him was in week 15. It was the game against the 49ers. It was a Thanksgiving game, and I remember this insanely clearly because it made me super annoyed. Jamal Adams got completely burnt to a crisp by Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel is a very fast and shifty wide receiver, one of the best to do it in the league, in my opinion, on the 49ers. Jamal Adams just got burnt and literally gave no effort on the play to try and catch up. Right now, Jamal Adams, I've seen enough. You get $16.5 million for cutting him. Jamal Adams just isn't a very good Seahawk, man. He's not worth the money that we're paying him right now. Another player I would consider cutting would be Will Disley. And the reason for cutting him would be, I think going forward, Colby Perkinson is going to be used as the number 2 tight end behind Noah Fant. Disley's production just wasn't there this year, only having 17 receptions for 172 yards and 1 touchdown coming in week 18 versus the Cardinals in 16 games. And he was the 3rd tight end in receptions. So it goes Noah Fant with, I believe, 31. Then it goes Colby Perkinson with 25. Colby Perkinson is actually 25 years old. Will Disley is 27. And if you cut Will Disley, you save $7 million. You can go into either the draft or free agency and pick up a 3rd tight end that's cheaper. And it gives time for Colby Perkinson to get in a groove and be a number 2 tight end, be a backup tight end, because I don't think Will Disley's production was just here. Thurman Jones, if we cut him now, we get $11.5 million, and here's my reason. For me, this decision is a very tough decision because although Dermont Jones didn't do horribly this season, 41 tackles, 4.5 sacks in 17 games, I think it would be foolish if the Seahawks gave up a second rounder for this year for only 10 games of Leonard Williams, who really played well in those 10 games. 41 tackles, 4 sacks. Leonard Williams is older. He is going to be 30. I understand that. And Dermont Jones is what, 27? So I understand that. But you need to make some tough decisions. Giving up a second for Leonard Williams and then letting him go is foolish in my opinion. And I want to see Leonard Williams be here next year as a Seahawk because he not only brings experience to a relatively young defensive line, but man, when I saw him in the Seahawk game recaps, when I was watching him and I was doing the recaps, I couldn't stop talking about him because the amount of, again, the effort he shows. We need guys that are run stoppers, and Leonard Williams is a run stopper. Imagine if the Seahawks had him the entire season. After just these 4 cuts, the new cap space for 2024 would be around 42 million for free agency. And don't forget, we could also restructure Geno Smith's contract. That'll save us 10.6 to 10.7 million dollars, which in total would bring us roughly up to the new cap, which would be 52 to 53 million dollars for 2024. And to re-sign 23 free agents and some of the big names on this list, you're going to need to make those tough decisions. And I think these 4 are more likely to go than any others because they eat up a lot more of the cap than I was really expecting. And they really didn't have good productive years this year. But I would like to hear your thoughts about this cap situation in the comments. Just keep them respectful. Where do we go from here? After all the cap shenanigans, I said I only see 2 options moving forward, but that was before the third option came into play where Pete Carroll gets relieved of his duties. But I'm going to read option 1 to you, and I'm going to read option 2 to you, and then I'm going to read actually what they're going to have to do in option 3. So, option 1. If Pete Carroll decides to stay as Seahawks head coach, we keep both Clint Hurtt and Shane Waldron. In my opinion, changing out the coordinators isn't the option here. I say we run it back with a few scheme changes, trying to get the tight ends more involved in the passing game and try to add in the draft more. Try and pick up more run stoppers on the D line and pick up a QB of the future like Penix, plus some offensive line help for depth. In that option, before the news broke, I was thinking about if Pete Carroll didn't get fired, I would have given him 1 more year to see if he could turn this around because it was his decision to bring in Clint Hurtt and Shane Waldron. So it's his bed to lay in if he does not pick up his socks in 2024, 2025. But now that Pete Carroll is fired, we'll go to option 2, and then I'll read you what we need to do in option 3. Option 2, and probably the far less likely, well, I kind of jinxed myself there, is that the Seahawks changed the whole coaching staff and culture of the entire team, from GM all the way down to the coordinators, bringing a whole new different system and outlook on the Seahawks as we know it. If we bring in a new regime, I don't know what the draft process will look like, so there's a lot of uncertainty there. When I'm going into the draft process, I'm not going to do a mock draft because to be honest with you, I only focus on NFL. I don't focus on the college side of things. I don't focus on the draft as much as I should, but I will educate myself on who's in the draft, what we're looking for. But in this type of scenario, which is what option 3 is now, we're now going to have to we're in a time now where everything is uncertain. At least with Pete Carroll being there for 14 years, I knew kind of what he was going to do. But now in option 3, with Pete Carroll no longer being the head coach of the Seahawks, first and foremost, we're going to need to find a head coach to fill that vacancy. Rumors right now are that Dan Quinn is a very strong candidate to take over the head coaching role. With that in mind, I think now that Pete is gone, we're not going to see Shane Waldron or Clint Hurt back as coordinators. And I can't wait to see. I can't wait to see what happens here because, like I said, when I was still shocked about Pete Carroll being fired, that's a huge shocker. And a lot of Seahawks fans I saw in the post there, some fans were really happy about it, and some fans are like, now you have to fire Shane Waldron and Clint Hurt. Don't worry, guys, they'll get fired in due time. But now, with a new regime, that throws the whole free agency thing that I did off because we don't know who's going to be cut. That throws the whole draft process off because we don't even know if we're going to pick up a QB of the future. We don't know if we're going to bring in D line to help out. We don't know if we're going to bring in offensive linemen to help out for depth, especially at the tackle position. We have no certainty. And right now, I am panicking a little bit because this is, again, like I said in the instant reaction video that I just posted, for me at least, I said this is the only regime I've ever known. 2012 to 2013 was when I decided to become a Seahawks fan and start following the team. I have not known another person other than Pete Carroll and John Schneider as the GM and head coach of this team. I'm excited for the challenge. And at this point, as I've calmed down and as I've realized, this is actually probably one of the best options, the option 3, because you're looking at what's happening around the NFL right now. It's insane the amount of head coaches that have been let go, and it's insane the amount of vacancies that have happened. Like Arthur Smith was just let go. Mike Vrabel, for example, was just let go. Like Dan Quinn's name is floating around there for a head coaching gig. You know, the the Chargers offensive coordinator is floating around there. I forget his name. Ben Johnson of the Philadelphia Eagles offensive coordinator is floating around there. Jim Harbaugh is still floating around there. So there's a lot of options. There's a lot of options for head coaches out there. So even though I'm panicking still inside because I'm kind of concerned about what the future is going to look like for the Seahawks, I'm really excited to see a new chapter. I really am. And I'm going to have more off-season content for you guys coming up in the future. Anyways, that is it for the Seahawk 2023-2024 season review. Hope you guys liked it, and I would like to hear your thoughts on what you think the team's going to do in free agency, what the team could possibly do in the draft, and things of that nature. I would love to hear your opinions on this matter because now we're thrown into the deep end. Now anything can happen with the Seahawks. That is it for this one. Please hit subscribe if you really like this video and like to see any more future content from me. And please hit like if you enjoyed it and it really helps out the channel. And please share it with all your Seahawks buddies or just anybody who likes football content in general because this is going to be a wild offseason. I can't wait to see what happens, and I can't wait for the start of the 2024-2025 season in September. Anyways, have a good day, guys. I will see you in the next one. Go Hawks, go.